The massive crystal walls of the Galactic Council chamber sparkled under the light of 3 artificial suns. Ambassador Du Hyun adjusted his simple black tie, a stark contrast to the flowing, shimmering robes worn by the immortal representatives. He stood straight, his weathered face calm despite the tension in the room. "The human species is too young," declared Aeons, the lead representative of the Immortal Collective. His voice echoed through the chamber, carrying the weight of countless centuries. "Too reckless. Too mortal." He spoke the last word as if it were a disease. Do Hyun watched as the other council members nodded in agreement. The immortals, with their golden skin and eyes that held the wisdom of millennia, had ruled the galaxy for longer than Earth had existed. They had achieved eternal life through technology so advanced it might as well be magic to most species. "With all respect," Du Hyun said, his voice steady and clear, "humanity's mortality is precisely why we should be allowed to join the Deep Space Exploration Initiative." He took a step forward, his shoes clicking against the crystal floor. "We understand the value of time because we have so little of it." Laughter rippled through the chamber. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that adults reserve for children who say something adorably naive. Aeons raised a hand, and the chamber fell silent. "Ambassador," Aeon said, floating down from his elevated seat to stand before Do Hyun, "your species has barely mastered faster than light travel. The deep space zones contain dangers that even we, with our eternal existence and advanced technology, approach with extreme caution. How can we trust humans not to?" He paused, searching for the right words, rush in blindly. Do Hyun smiled. It wasn't his diplomatic smile, the one he used in formal meetings. This was the smile his wife said made him look like a kid planning mischief. Perhaps a demonstration would help. The chamber's mood shifted. The immortals loved demonstrations. In their eternal existence, entertainment was as valuable as knowledge. Aeons gestured for him to continue. Do Hyun pulled out his personal computer tablet, a simple device by immortal standards, but it connected him directly to Earth's scientific council. "Dr. Jai-1," he called out, and a holographic screen appeared in the center of the chamber. A woman in her late 40s appeared, her lab coat slightly singed and her hair tied back messily. "Ambassador," she bowed slightly. "Is it time?" "Indeed." Du Hyun turned to address the council. "The Immortal Collective has stated that stable micro-wormhole creation is impossible. Your scientists spent 3,000 years proving this mathematically." "Correct." Aeons nodded slowly. "The calculations are absolute. The energy requirements alone make it." "Dr. Jai-1," Du Hyun interrupted, something that was simply not done in the council chamber. "Please show them Project Phoenix." The scientist grinned and stepped aside. Behind her was what looked like a large metal ring, about 3 meters in diameter. Cables and wires sprouted from it like mechanical vines, leading to various machines. At its center was a coffee maker. "Is this a joke?" one of the council members asked, their eternal patience showing signs of wear. "No joke," Jai-1 said, typing commands into her console. "Though I did get the idea while making coffee. Funny how that works, isn't it?" The ring began to hum. Blue energy crackled around its edges. The coffee maker in the center began to glow. "Impossible," Aeons whispered, his eternal composure cracking as his instruments detected what was happening. The energy readings. "There? Stable," Jai-1 finished for him. "Would you like a demonstration? I could really use some coffee, and the best coffee shop I know is about 300 light years from here." The chamber erupted in chaos. Immortal beings who had lived for millennia were standing up, shouting, pointing at their instruments. Some were demanding explanations, others were insisting it had to be a trick. Do Hyun walked over to stand beside Aeons, who was staring at the holographic display with an expression of pure disbelief. "You know what humans say in moments like this?" he asked quietly. Aeons turned to him slowly. "What do they say?" "Hold my beer." The center of the ring rippled like water, and a perfect circle of somewhere else appeared. Through it, they could see a small coffee shop. The sign was in Korean, and the morning sun was shining through its windows. Jae-won walked through the wormhole as casually as walking through a door. The Immortal Council watched in stunned silence as she ordered a coffee, paid, and walked back through. Steam was still rising from the cup. "Would anyone like some?" she offered, holding up the coffee. "It's really quite good." Aeons had lived for over 10,000 years. He had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars. But in all that time, he had never seen anything quite like this. He turned to Do-hyun, who was trying very hard not to look too pleased with himself. "How?" It was all the Immortal could manage to ask. "Well," Do-hyun said, straightening his tie again, "when someone tells a human something is impossible, we tend to take it as a challenge, and we're very, very good at finding unconventional solutions." "Using a coffee maker?" another council member asked weakly. "The principle was similar to how my coffee maker heats water," Jae-won explained through the hologram. "Just had to adjust it to work with quantum fields instead. Simple, really. Though I did go through quite a few coffee makers getting it right." Do-hyun cleared his throat. "Now about that deep space exploration initiative." Aeons held up a hand, a gesture that usually commanded immediate silence. But Jae-won was still chattering excitedly about quantum field modifications and coffee maker specifications. The Immortal looked at Do-hyun with what might have been the beginning of respect. "You planned this," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Of course," Do-hyun admitted. "Humanity has learned that sometimes the best way to get a seat at the table is to flip the table over and build a better one." He paused. "Metaphorically speaking, of course." "Of course," Aeons echoed faintly, watching as Jae-won began explaining her calculations to a group of thoroughly confused Immortal scientists. "I believe the Council will need time to process this development." "Take all the time you need," Do-hyun said graciously. "We'll be here." "Well, not right here. Ji-won has some ideas about using her device to explore other dimensions, and I should probably make sure she doesn't accidentally create a universe in her lab." He started walking toward the chamber doors, then stopped and turned back. "Unless you'd like to help, she could always use more funding and resources." The look of horror on the Immortals' faces was answer enough. As Do-hyun left the chamber, he could hear Jae-won still enthusiastically explaining her coffee maker theory to anyone who would listen. Behind him, the council chamber had descended into the kind of chaos that only humans seemed capable of creating. In the corridor outside, Do-hyun finally allowed himself a real smile. Humanity's first step into the greater galaxy had gone exactly as planned. Complete and utter chaos followed by reluctant acceptance. It was, he reflected, a pattern that humans had perfected over thousands of years. His computer tablet beeped with a message from Jae-won. "Next time, I'll show them how we solved the cold fusion problem using a modified toaster." Do-hyun shook his head, already dreading and looking forward to the next council meeting. Sometimes, he thought, the best diplomacy was simply letting humans be humans. After all, nothing in the galaxy was quite as terrifying as a human with a crazy idea and the determination to make it work. Dr. Hejun stared at the coffee maker attached to the quantum ring with a mix of worry and wonder. The device had no right to work, yet here it was, breaking several laws of physics while making a perfect cup of coffee. "Jae-won," he called out to his colleague, who was busy typing calculations into 3 different computers at once. "Maybe we should wait for proper safety checks before the next test." Jae-won looked up from her work, her glasses slightly crooked on her nose. "Safety checks," she laughed. "Hejun, we just invented stable wormhole technology using kitchen appliances. I don't think there's a safety manual for that." The laboratory was a curious mix of cutting-edge technology, and what looked like a kitchen appliance store had exploded. Toasters, microwaves, and at least 7 coffee makers were connected to various pieces of equipment. Cables ran everywhere, and a small robot vacuum cleaner moved between them. trying its best to keep the floor clean. The Immortals sent a message, Hajun said, holding up his tablet. They want detailed explanations of how the technology works, and they're sending a scientific team to observe. Perfect. Jaewon clapped her hands together. They can help us with the next phase. I have this idea about using a microwave to create a time portal. Hajun dropped his tablet. A what? Think about it, Jaewon said, already moving to a whiteboard covered in equations. If a coffee maker can manipulate space, why can't a microwave manipulate time? They both work with waves, after all. Before Hajun could point out the many problems with that logic, the laboratory door opened. A young engineer named Kim Suho walked in, carrying what looked like a modified game console. Dr. Jaewon, he called out excitedly. I think I found a way to stabilize the quantum field using video game processing units. They're much better at handling parallel operations than standard computers. Jaewon's eyes lit up. Show me. Hajun watched in growing alarm as Jaewon and Suho connected the game console to the wormhole ring. He had worked with Jaewon long enough to know that trying to stop her was pointless. The best he could do was make sure they didn't accidentally create a black hole. Again. The Immortal delegation will be here in 10 minutes, he reminded them. Plenty of time, Jaewon said, not looking up from the game console. Suho, run the initialization sequence. Hajun, could you make some coffee? The normal way, I mean. We need the other coffee maker for science. The next 10 minutes were a blur of activity. Suho's game console started projecting holographic displays that looked surprisingly professional. G1 managed to create 3 small but stable wormholes, each leading to different parts of the laboratory. The robot vacuum cleaner went through one and came out another, still determinedly cleaning. When the Immortal delegation arrived, led by Chief Researcher Eternus, they found a scene that would haunt them for centuries to come. Jaewon was halfway through one wormhole, her upper body in another part of the lab, while her legs stuck out near the door. Suho was using the wormholes to play a modified version of ping pong with himself, the ball traveling through space in impossible ways. And Hajun was calmly serving coffee, having apparently accepted that this was his life now. What is happening here? Eternus asked, his golden skin paling slightly. Jaewon extracted herself from the wormhole and straightened her lab coat. Oh, hello. We're just running some tests. Would you like to see how it works? Before the Immortals could respond, she launched into an explanation that involved quantum mechanics, coffee brewing temperatures, and why video game consoles were secretly the most advanced computers on Earth. She used terms like quantum percolation and space-time foam in ways that made the Immortal scientists twitch. This defies all known laws of physics, one of the Immortal scientists said weakly. Oh, those aren't laws, Jaewon said cheerfully. They're more like guidelines. Very useful guidelines, but sometimes you need to think outside the box. She patted the coffee maker affectionately, or inside the coffee maker, in this case. Suho, who had finally finished his quantum ping-pong game, joined the conversation. Dr. Jaewon, I've been thinking, if we can create stable wormholes, couldn't we theoretically create a time loop? Not for anything dangerous, he added quickly, seeing the horror on the Immortals' faces. Just small loops. Maybe send tomorrow's coffee to ourselves today. The Immortal delegation watched in growing alarm as Jaewon's eyes lit up with that particular spark the humans got when they were about to do something incredibly clever and potentially catastrophic. Suho, you're brilliant. She rushed to her computer. We'll need to modify the microwave's temporal frequency, but if we connect it to the game console's processing power. Stop. Eternus held up his hands. This is exactly why we're concerned. You can't just play with the fundamental forces of the universe like this. Why not? Jaewon asked, genuinely curious. The universe is full of wonderful puzzles. Solving them is fun. Fun. Another immortal scientist looked like they might faint. You're treating space-time manipulation as a game. Games are excellent teaching tools, Suho pointed out. That's why I used a game console. The physics engine was already designed to handle complex spatial calculations. I just had to modify it a bit. Hajun, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. I think what my colleagues are trying to say is that humanity's approach to science is different from yours. We don't have millennia to perfect our theories. We have to work with what we have, find creative solutions, and yes, sometimes we treat it like a game. Because that's how we learn best. The immortals huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. Meanwhile, Jae-won and Suho had already started working on their time loop theory, using the microwave and what appeared to be parts from a digital watch. We will need to report this to the council, Eternus finally said. This level of technological advancement, combined with your unique approach to scientific method, requires careful consideration. Of course, Hajun agreed diplomatically. We understand your concerns about safety. Behind him, there was a small explosion from the microwave. Suho emerged from a cloud of smoke, his hair standing on end but grinning widely. Dr. Jae-won, I think we just sent a cup of noodles 5 minutes into the future. Really? Jae-won rushed over excitedly. Quick, set up the temporal sensors. We need to document this. The immortal delegation left shortly after, their usual eternal calm thoroughly shaken. As they walked down the corridor, they could hear Jae-won's excited voice. If we can send noodles through time, imagine what we could do with a full kitchen. Hajun watched them leave, then turned back to his colleagues. Someone needed to make sure they didn't accidentally create a temporal paradox while trying to improve their lunch options. Besides, he had to admit, he was curious about what would happen next. After all, he thought as he prepared another pot of normal, non-space-bending coffee, if humans were going to revolutionize physics, they might as well have fun doing it. The universe had never seen anything quite like human scientists with access to kitchen appliances and video game consoles. And somewhere in the lab, the robot vacuum cleaner continued its endless journey through the wormholes, cleaning the same spot in space from multiple angles, completely unfazed by the laws of physics being rewritten around it. The news of humanity's breakthrough spread through the galactic community like a shockwave. In the grand meeting hall of the Immortal Science Academy, Chief Researcher Eternus presented his findings to a gathering of the galaxy's most distinguished minds. They created stable wormholes using modified kitchen appliances, he said, his voice carrying a mix of disbelief and concern. And now they're attempting to manipulate time using a microwave oven. The assembled immortal scientists sat in stunned silence. On the massive display screen behind Eternus, recordings showed Dr. Jae-won's team at work. The latest footage revealed their newest team member, Park Min-ji, who had joined the project after hearing about the success of the coffee maker wormhole. In the laboratory on Earth, Min-ji was currently explaining her latest idea to Hojun. What if we combine the wormhole technology with the time manipulation experiments? She asked, drawing diagrams on a tablet. We could create a temporal observatory. Hajun looked up from his safety calculations. A what? Think about it. Min-ji continued enthusiastically. If we can bend space and time separately, why not together? We could create a viewing window into different time periods. Before Hajun could respond, Jae-won burst into the lab, followed by Suho. Both were carrying what appeared to be modified kitchen toasters. Min-ji's right, Jae-won declared, setting her toaster down on a workbench. We've been thinking too linearly. Suho, show them what we discovered. Suho connected his toaster to the main computer system. We found out that the heating elements in toasters create a unique electromagnetic field pattern. If we adjust it just right, a small sphere of light appeared above the toaster. Within it, they could see what looked like ancient Earth, dinosaurs roaming across prehistoric plains. It's just a window for now, Suho explained proudly. We can't send anything through yet, but it's proof that the concept works. Hajun stared at the temporal window, his scientific curiosity finally overcoming his caution. How stable is it? Quite stable, Jaiwan said, adjusting some controls. The toaster's timing mechanism helps regulate the temporal flow. Though we did accidentally send one slice of bread about 65 million years into the past. You what? Hajun asked, alarmed. Don't worry, Minji assured him. According to our calculations, it would have burned up in the atmosphere, probably. Meanwhile, in the Immortal Science Academy, Eternus continued his presentation. Their approach to scientific discovery is unprecedented. They treat fundamental forces of the universe as if they were toys to be played with. Surely they understand the dangers, one of the elder scientists asked. They understand, Eternus replied, but they don't seem to care. Or rather, they see the dangers as challenges to overcome rather than warnings to heed. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent message. On Earth, Jaiwan's team had made another breakthrough. The massive screen showed a new recording, mere minutes old. Lee Junho, the team's newest addition, had found a way to stabilize the temporal windows using sound waves. He stood before his colleagues, explaining his discovery while gesturing at a modified sound system. Music has mathematical patterns, Junho explained in the recording. By synchronizing the temporal frequency with specific musical harmonies, we can maintain stable temporal apertures indefinitely. The Immortals watched in horror as the human scientists began calibrating their equipment using what appeared to be classical music. Mozart's Symphony No. 40 played through the laboratory as multiple temporal windows opened, each showing a different period in Earth's history. This is remarkable. Minji's voice came through clearly. The rhythm of the music actually helps stabilize the quantum field fluctuations. Junho, you're a genius. Thanks, Junho replied modestly. I got the idea while listening to music during my lunch break. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. Back in the academy, Eternus faced his fellow immortals. They've achieved in months what we couldn't in millennia. And they're doing it with household appliances and music. Perhaps, a younger immortal scientist suggested carefully, we've been approaching these problems from the wrong direction. Our caution, while wise, may have limited our perspective. Are you suggesting we should act more like them? Another scientist gestured at the screen, where Jaiwan's team was now using different musical genres to create various temporal effects. I'm suggesting we should at least try to understand their methods, however unorthodox they may be. On the screen, Hojun was carefully documenting each discovery while trying to maintain some semblance of scientific protocol. But even he couldn't hide his excitement when Junho's musical temporal stabilization created a perfect, crystal-clear window into the Library of Alexandria. We could revolutionize historical research, Minji said, taking rapid notes. Think of all the lost knowledge we could recover. Not just historical research, Suho added. If we can stabilize larger windows, we could study the formation of galaxies, the birth of stars, the beginning of the universe itself. Jaiwan looked at her team with pride. And to think, the Immortals said this was impossible. Sometimes all you need is a fresh perspective and a willingness to try the ridiculous. The Immortal Science Academy erupted into heated debate. Some argued for immediately shutting down the human experiments. Others, increasingly intrigued by humanity's successes, suggested establishing closer collaboration. Eternus watched the chaos unfold with a growing realization. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or even their creativity. It was their ability to see past the impossible, to try things that no sane, immortal being would ever consider. In the laboratory, Jaiwan's team was already planning their next experiment. Minji had suggested using refrigerator cooling systems to try and slow down time itself. Suho was modifying another game console to help calculate the required energy patterns. Junho was composing a specific piece of music to help stabilize the process. And Hojun, ever the voice of reason, was quietly ensuring that all their mad ideas had at least some safety protocols in place. Someone had to make sure they didn't accidentally freeze time throughout the solar system while trying to keep their drinks cold. As the day drew to a close, the robot vacuum cleaner continued its eternal journey through space and time, now accompanied by Mozart's Symphony No. 40. In its wake, it left not just clean floors, but a trail of broken physical laws and shattered immortal assumptions. The universe, it seemed, would never be quite the same after humans decided to reinvent physics using their kitchen appliances. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, a piece of toast from 65 million years ago was still falling through Earth's prehistoric atmosphere, proving that even humanity's failures could make history. After all, as J1 liked to say, science was all about trying new things, even if those things involved using a toaster to create windows through time while listening to classical music. Ambassador Du Hyun stood before the full Galactic Council once again. This time, however, the chamber held a different atmosphere. Gone was the condescending patience of the immortals. Instead, there was a nervous energy in the room, like the feeling before a storm. "Your scientists," Aeons began, his voice carefully controlled, "have created temporal viewing windows using kitchen appliances and music." "Yes," Du Hyun replied simply. "They've made remarkable progress." Progress. Another council member stood up. "They're playing with forces that could unravel the fabric of reality." Do Hyun adjusted his tie calmly. "Actually, Dr. Jaewon's team has developed several safety protocols. Dr. Hejun has been quite thorough in their implementation." The chamber's display screens activated, showing the laboratory. Hejun was explaining the safety measures to a group of visiting immortal scientists, while behind him, the rest of the team worked on their latest project. "As you can see," Hejun said in the recording, pointing to various instruments, "we've installed multiple failsafes. Any temporal anomaly beyond our set parameters triggers an immediate shutdown." He paused as Minji walked past, carrying what appeared to be a modified blender. "Though I should mention that the parameters themselves are somewhat flexible." The recording shifted to show Jaewon's main work area. The scientist was surrounded by various kitchen appliances, each modified in ways that made the immortal observers deeply uncomfortable. Suho sat nearby, programming something into his latest gaming system. "The temporal viewing windows are completely stable now," Jaewon explained enthusiastically. "Junho's musical stabilization method works perfectly. We're currently using a combination of Bach and traditional Korean music to maintain optimal quantum harmony." Minji appeared in the frame, her eyes bright with excitement. "Tell them about the dimensional research." The council chamber erupted in alarmed murmurs. Aeons raised his hand for silence. "Dimensional research." Do Hyun smiled his diplomatic smile. "Yes, that's actually why I'm here today. We have a proposal for the council." He pressed a button on his tablet, and new images appeared on the displays. They showed complex mathematical equations, interwoven with musical notes, and what appeared to be recipes for various beverages. "Dr. Jaewon's team has discovered something fascinating," Du Hyun continued. "It seems that the space between dimensions resonates at frequencies similar to those produced by certain kitchen appliances, specifically blenders." The council watched in growing horror as the recording showed Minji activating her modified blender. The air above it began to shimmer, and through the distortion, they could see something. It looked like their reality, but slightly different. Colors that shouldn't exist played across the surface of the dimensional window. "We can't maintain the window for long yet," Minji's voice explained, "but we're making progress. Junho is composing a special piece of music that should help stabilize the interdimensional frequencies." The recording shifted to Junho's workspace, where the scientist sat surrounded by musical instruments and quantum field generators. He was carefully adjusting the timing of a complex musical piece while monitoring the dimensional stability readings. "The key," Junho explained to a thoroughly bewildered immortal observer, "is finding the right harmony between the blender's resonance frequency and the natural vibration of the dimensional barriers. Classical music works well as a base, but we found that adding elements of jazz creates interesting quantum effects. Back in the council chamber, Do Hyun cleared his throat. We would like to propose a joint research initiative. Humanity's innovative approach combined with immortal wisdom and resources. Think of what we could discover together. Discover. An elder council member's voice shook slightly. Your species is trying to punch holes in dimensional barriers using kitchen appliances and jazz music. Actually, Do Hyun corrected politely, we're using a fusion of classical, jazz, and traditional Korean music. The dimensional barriers respond better to a diverse musical selection. The display showed Suho testing this theory, carefully adjusting the musical mix, while Min-ji monitored the dimensional window. Through it, they could see versions of themselves working with slightly different equipment. One version of Min-ji was using what appeared to be a modified rice cooker instead of a blender. The multi-dimensional research team is already sharing data across realities, Do Hyun explained. It's quite efficient. Actually, every version of the team approaches the problem slightly differently. We're learning from each other's successes and failures. Aeons leaned forward in his seat. You're collaborating with alternate versions of yourselves. Of course, Do Hyun replied. Who better to work with than people who think like us but have different perspectives? Though it does make coffee breaks a bit crowded. The recording showed the laboratory during one such break. Multiple versions of the research team sat around, drinking coffee and discussing their findings. Each version had slight differences, different clothes, different equipment, but all shared the same enthusiastic approach to impossible problems. The really interesting part, Do Hyun continued, is that we've discovered the immortals in some of these alternate dimensions have already joined the research. Those teams are making remarkable progress. The council members looked at each other uncertainly. The idea of their alternate selves collaborating with humans on such dangerous research was unsettling. We're standing at a crossroads, Do Hyun said, his voice growing serious. Humanity has discovered these capabilities. We will continue to explore them, to push the boundaries of what's possible. The only question is whether we do it alone, or with the benefit of your wisdom and experience. The laboratory recording showed Hejun carefully documenting the results of their latest experiment. Behind him, 3 different versions of Jaewon were excitedly discussing the possibility of using a dimensional blender to make the perfect smoothie across multiple realities simultaneously. Your wisdom could help us avoid potential mistakes, Do Hyun continued. Your experience could guide us away from dangerous paths. Or, he paused meaningfully, you could wait and see what humans discover on their own, using kitchen appliances and creativity. The council chamber fell silent as the immortals considered this. On the display, the various versions of the research team continued their work, each reality adding its own unique approach to the problem. Junho's music played softly in the background, its complex harmonies holding multiple dimensional windows stable. Through them, they could see other council chambers, other versions of this very meeting, each taking a slightly different path. The universe, it seemed, was about to change. The only question was whether the immortals would help guide that change, or simply watch in horror as humans rewrote the laws of reality while making their morning coffee. The grand ceremonial hall of the Galactic Council gleamed under the light of artificial suns. After 3 months of intense debate, the Immortal Collective had reached a decision about humanity's role in the galaxy. Ambassador Do Hyun stood calmly at the center of the hall, while Dr. Jaewon and her team waited in their laboratory, watching through a stable wormhole connection. Aeons rose from his seat, his golden robes shimmering. The collective has considered humanity's proposal for joint research initiatives, he announced. We have also reviewed the remarkable progress made by your scientists. The display screens around the hall showed highlights from the past 3 months. G1's team had continued their experiments, now with careful documentation and safety protocols that even Hejun approved of. The modified kitchen appliances had grown more sophisticated, though they still maintained their humble origins. In some ways, Aeons continued, your species reminds us of ourselves in our younger days, before we achieved immortality. We too were once driven by the urgency of limited time. He paused, looking at Du Hyun. Though we never thought to use coffee makers for spatial manipulation. A small laugh rippled through the chamber. Even some of the most serious immortals had developed a grudging appreciation for humanity's unusual approaches. Therefore, Aeons declared, we accept your proposal for collaboration. The Immortal Collective will share its knowledge with humanity, and in return, we hope to learn from your unique perspective. In the laboratory, Jaewon's team erupted in cheers. Through the various dimensional windows they had established, their alternate versions celebrated as well. Each reality had slightly different reactions. In one, they popped champagne. In another, they ordered pizza, but all shared the same joy. However, Aeons raised his hand for silence. We have some conditions. Of course, Du Hyun nodded diplomatically. First, all experiments involving household appliances must be supervised by immortal scientists. Aeons looked slightly pained as he added, we will assign teams who are adaptable. The screen showed Chief Researcher Eternus, who had volunteered to lead the supervision team. Over the past months, he had developed an unexpected enthusiasm for human innovation, even suggesting improvements to Jaewon's coffee maker wormhole generator. Second, Aeons continued, we request that Dr. Hejun's safety protocols become the standard for all joint research projects. He glanced at the screens where Hejun was visible, still documenting everything meticulously. At least someone on your team understands the value of caution. Hejun looked up from his work and gave a small, satisfied nod. Besides him, Minji was already sketching plans for a new experiment involving a quantum-enhanced washing machine. She claimed it could clean clothes across multiple dimensions simultaneously. And finally, Aeons said, his voice becoming serious, we ask that you teach us. A surprised murmur ran through the chamber. Immortals asking to learn from humans. It was unprecedented. Your species has shown us something we had forgotten. Aeons explained. The value of seeing old problems with new eyes. The importance of, what did Dr. Jaewon call it? Thinking outside the box. Or inside the coffee maker, Du Hyun added with a slight smile. Indeed. Aeons actually smiled back. We have existed for so long that we forgot how to question our assumptions. Your success has shown us that perhaps eternal life has made us too rigid in our thinking. Through the dimensional windows, they could see this scene playing out differently in various realities. In some, the immortals were more enthusiastic, in others more reserved, but in all of them, the basic truth remained the same. Humanity had changed the galaxy forever. Ambassador, Aeons said, would you be willing to establish a permanent human presence on the Immortal Science Council? We believe your perspective would be valuable. Do Hyun bowed slightly. We would be honored. Though I should warn you, Dr. Jaewon has already started planning improvements to your council chamber's architecture. Something about quantum resonance and acoustic optimization. In the laboratory, Jaewon was indeed sketching plans on a tablet. Jun-ho looked over her shoulder, suggesting modifications to account for the musical harmonies they had discovered. Suho was reprogramming his latest game console to handle the calculations, while Minji experimented with different appliance combinations. We accept humanity as full partners in galactic research and exploration, Aeons announced formally. Though perhaps we should establish some guidelines about which kitchen appliances are permitted in official ceremonies. The chamber erupted in applause, both from the immortals and from the various dimensional versions of humanity watching through their windows. The robot vacuum cleaner, which had somehow gained the ability to clean across dimensional barriers, continued its eternal work, maintaining pristine floors throughout the multiverse. Later that evening, in a quiet corner of the Immortal Science Academy, Aeons shared a drink with Du Hyun. It wasn't beer. It was coffee from Jaewon's original wormhole-generating coffee maker, now considered a historical artifact. You know, Aeons said thoughtfully, in all my millennia of existence, I never expected to see kitchen appliances revolutionize our understanding of the universe. That's humanity for you, Do-hyun replied. We work with what we have. Though I should mention. He checked his tablet. Dr. Jae-won's team has started experimenting with quantum-enhanced barbecue grills. They think they might be able to cook food using energy from different stars across the galaxy. Aeon's nearly choked on his coffee. They're what? Don't worry, Do-hyun assured him. Hajun is supervising the project, though he did mention something about needing to establish safety protocols for possible solar flare-induced caramelization. As if to emphasize his point, a distant explosion echoed through the academy, followed by Jae-won's excited voice, announcing a breakthrough in stellar cuisine technology. Aeons and Do-hyun shared a look of understanding. This was just the beginning of a very interesting new era in galactic history. After all, if humans could revolutionize physics with coffee makers and toasters, imagine what they could do with full access to galactic technology. The universe would never be the same, but perhaps that was exactly what it needed. A little human chaos to shake up the eternal order. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space-time, that original piece of toast was still falling through Earth's prehistoric atmosphere, now accompanied by the harmonious sounds of Junho's quantum-stabilizing symphony, leaving behind a trail of broken physical laws and endless possibilities.